Right, morning everyone. Welcome to our Food Safety Culture webinar. It's the first in a series of webinars that we're going to be hosting. It's a very exciting day for Food Focus. Thank you so much for joining us. As you can see in the studio today, I have Professor Rake Lewis from Bloemfontein. Give us a wave, Rake. I have Najib Salim, RCL Foods, Quality Executive. She's with me in Benoni. She's come up from Durban. And then last but not least, Rolf Ace, Intercom down in Cape Town. Give us a wave, Rolf. I keep referring back to the listeriosis outbreak, but the event, I think, has completely rocked our worlds as food safety professionals. And I think that all role players in the food industry have had to sit up and to of where are we? Are we doing the right? What needs to change, because we've been doing some great things for the last few years, but it's obviously hasn't completely assisted us. We seem to still have some problems, and so because of that we need to relook at what we're doing. And I really feel that this is a watershed moment for food safety in South Africa, and we would need to be using this tragedy to help us to review our systems and to identify any potential weaknesses. In the last few weeks, we've had extra regulations and promulgated, and I think the question is do we need more regulations and more audits, or is there something else? There are many companies, including Enterprise, that have all the right systems in place. They might even have certification, but we still find ourselves consistently battling the same issues in our facilities, from one audit to the next. In fact, from one day to the next, you're still having to tell people to wear their hair nets in the correct way. There's always a flurry of activity prior to audits, but then we settle back into our day-to-day state of food safety inertia. And despite spending millions on food safety training, we just don't seem to be able to get the level of engagement from staff and management. People just don't embrace, our food safety management system, enthusiastically, and it's a real concern. And so we've put together a group of people today that are hopefully going to help us understand a little bit more about food safety culture, because it could be that there's something about your culture that's actually blocking your food safety objectives. Maybe there are aspects of your organization's culture that are spilling over into your food safety initiatives, and they're actually stunting your progress. So it gives me great pleasure now to ask Professor Rake Lewis from the Central University of Technology to take us through a short presentation on exactly what is food safety culture and what has been happening out there in terms of this particular aspect of science, and how can we use the work that's been done in behavioral change to actually assist us from a food safety perspective. So Rake, over to you.
Thank you so much, Linda, for the introduction. Colleagues, hello everyone, and also to the panel members. It's a huge privilege for me to address you on this issue and to just put our heads together in terms of this aspect of food safety and culture specifically. I think if there's something, and Linda alluded to this, ladies and gentlemen, is that we've seen something in the last few years, and that is that compliance does not necessarily equal performance. You can comply, you can have your checks and balances systems in place, you can really score relatively high in terms of your systems and process, but still there can be some shortcomings in your plant and in terms of food safety. And at the end of the day, there's a lot of discussion going on now. Where does this what can we do in the food industry to also pick up those aspects of food safety that's beyond only our systems and process? And at the end of the day, it boils down to your workers on all different levels, from management, mid-level managers to shop floor, to buy into a culture of food safety and to go the extra mile to do some of the things that can add to food safety beyond only their own post description. And we see this lots of places. We see it in rugby teams, we see it in sports teams, we see it in other types of industries where your planning, your process, your system inherently stays the same, but your performance starts picking up the moment that you've got a good and a positive culture. And I think this is what this webinar is definitely about, for us to say, we have systems and process, but how do we go beyond that? Thank you for the slide, Linda. So at the end of the day, the question is how does management or a company also utilize all the other potentially available checks and balances of all the workers from lower level to higher level in assisting with food safety, and potentially all these senses of different workers are available to pick up something that is wrong, to check out, to see a risk, to identify something that should not be there, and that is the essence of culture. Next slide, please. So what we are trying to do, and Food Focus definitely with this webinar, is to ask what is the contribution of the human in the plant, beyond only the system, beyond only the process, beyond only all of these systems that we put in place. And certainly some of the outbreaks and some of the problems that we've seen recently was definitely because of that. And Linda alluded to that a little bit earlier, that everything was in place, but somewhere there was a missing link. And we want to start creating awareness to say that the missing link is the human factor, and the human factor mostly will be utilized in terms of the right organizational culture. Next slide, please. So very briefly, ladies and gentlemen, when you have staff members on a shop floor working in a big food processing plant, ironically or interestingly, it's not the systems and the processes that motivates people, but it's those constructs and aspects of human behavior that are important to us, that drive us. Need is something that drives us all. Need for acknowledgement sometimes, physical needs, your salary, financial needs play a role, emotions plays a role, and how you interact with your fellow colleagues. There are a lot of other aspects that play a role, and here this slide shows a few of them. And interestingly, these are the matters that you must focus on if you want to create a culture. It's not always the system process. And this is not issues that traditionally we've talked about in food safety. This is a total change of approach away from the administrative procedural aspect to the human being. And we strongly believe that that is the missing link, or at least one of the missing links in creating food safety. So this is just a slide to show briefly that, interestingly, and sometimes I say this tongue in the cheek to some of my colleagues with a lot of love, though, that our process and systems, irrespective of how important they may seem, people don't necessarily like doing that. They do that because of compliance, but it's not something that they look necessarily forward to. And there's been a lot of research that shows just the opposite. And I like to show this, and you can Google this. There's a lot of work. This is seen as one of the flagship projects done in what motivates people in the workplace. And you'll see there on the left-hand side, extreme job satisfaction. And this was one study, and I suppose there's been other studies done as well. And it shows that company policy administration, supervision, your relationship with your supervisor, those are on the left-hand side. The big blue bars are the main aspects of dissatisfaction, extreme dissatisfaction at work. So I think as auditors and as food safety professionals and people caring about food, we need to understand that we may like the HACCP system, but the staff members working there on the shop floor, they not necessarily like all this process and system. Now, that doesn't say that it shouldn't be there, but it should make us aware and alert us to what the influence of all these systems are on the culture of the organization. Next slide, please. So that does not necessarily say that many of the systems that we have and processes that we have were wrong. They are absolutely necessary. But I think the way that we've been even approaching our current systems and process, we may want to have a relook at that. Audits, we sometimes, or in the past at least, considered the audits to be just a check and a balance system. And if we look at the human approach of the audit, maybe there's some rationale in saying that it should rather be focused on continuous performance and improvement rather than just checks and balances. And that the assessment should be on systems and not on people. And sometimes I think we may have erred in this way, is that what we've done is when we've picked up a non-conformance, immediately there would have been a person behind that non-conformance that are in a way implicated. And that immediately means that there's a consequence, or maybe a consequence, because how do you rectify it? You address it either by that person, in what way? And then that relates to fear and disengagement. And we've done some surveys recently where we asked the questions, but if you pick up something from the floor that looks risky, do you really see this as an opportunity to bring it to the fore, or are you afraid rather? And many people have said, I'm just not going there. It's not my job. I'd rather not do it. And so sometimes our audits have got just the opposite outcome that we planned them to be. So this is not the whole emphasis shift to food safety cultures, to the human factor is not necessarily new. Although I think South Africa is quite ahead in terms of our awareness of the role of this. It is widely acknowledged and driven by certainly very big companies internationally. One of them is Walmart, for example. Most of you probably know Frank Janus, who is the Vice President of Food Safety. So he's written a number of books. We've also received some training, and he's giving training worldwide. Chris Griffith is another academic that was he was with the Cardiff Institute for a while, definitely doing some of the first work on the role of culture. And this is just an extract from Janus's book where he kind of puts this whole aspect of culture very nicely into one sentence, where he says, if we are to ensure food safety beyond regulatory inspections, testing and training, then we require a better understanding of organizational culture and human dimensions. And I think better we cannot, sum up this entire presentation, because this is what it's all about. So from our side, we'd like to create awareness about this also in our country, and definitely because of some of the outbreaks that we've seen recently, this is really coming to the fore. So very briefly, and I'm approaching the end of the presentation, because we wanted to open up for discussion rather, is that if you look at food safety culture, there are many different definitions of what culture is. You can have a look on the internet in literature, but I think this one is one of the better definitions. It's the attitudes, values, norms, beliefs, and behaviors that a particular group of people share with respect to food safety, food risk and safety. And we always say, when we talk about this informally, that maybe an informal definition of this would be, this is the way that we do things around here, which kind of also sums it up quite nicely. So just very briefly, ironically, we said earlier that compliance does not necessarily equal performance. We've seen that in the food sector, we've seen it in many other aspects. We've seen it in the audits of some municipalities where there's full compliance but no performance, full compliance in terms of audits but no service delivery. So that is very clear. In food safety aspects, we're seeing the same things. And this is just one example of what, in terms of management, the management of organizations can do if they just realize this, that there are many different categories or levels of interaction between a worker or an employee and an organization. And this does not only just relate to food safety, it relates to occupational health and safety, it relates to many other industries. And basically what you would need is you would want to have staff that are engaged with your company on the top level, which is a trust-based level. All the other levels are lower levels of interaction where you can really not as much depend on a person going beyond only his or her job to buy into that institutional culture. I'm not going to spend too much time on the other aspects here, but maybe just something about trust. It basically relates to the fact that if you're an employee, doesn't matter on what level, you trust your company for looking after you and for caring about you, and the company trusts yourself, the organization trusts you to also have the best interest of the company at heart. And if you are there, at that stage, you can expect an employee to go beyond his or her duty to other aspects of performance that is not even his or her responsibility, like identifying a risk, reporting that risk, cleaning something or picking up something that was not even his or her responsibility, making alert if something is not the way that it should be, discussing and supporting one another. So I think there are many other models as well, but this is just one model to explain how vastly different people can be involved in organizations. What we don't want, the bottommost level where you just work, it's a service offering, you get paid and you don't do anything else. That is not, and with good management, you can go beyond that. I wanted to say something very briefly about knowledge and training and awareness, and competency and ability, because all of those are interlinked. And this slide, I think, just makes a point that you can have the knowledge in the head, you can have lots of training, there can be lots of systems in terms of that you put in place to create knowledge, but it's not necessarily that knowledge will go into or advance to behaviors. It's only when the knowledge value chain has advanced much further and becomes a value and then becomes a behavior that you can expect people to really start doing what they've learned. And we talk about risk awareness also a lot, which is very closely linked to knowledge, because we've had discussions that said, but even if staff members are buying into a culture and are willing to go beyond just the necessary of their job descriptions, do they know when something poses a threat? Do they really know it should be there or it shouldn't be there, or this might be harmful to somebody? So I think the role of knowledge and the role of training cannot be underestimated. So just very briefly, we've been talking with Linda and Food Focus a while ago on the term of decolonizing, and that was related to the listeriosis incidents. But I think a point that we wanted to make is when we talk about institutional culture, the things that motivate people in our country in the workplace, or the things that demotivate people in our country in the workplace, all those constructs that demotivates people are probably a little bit different. Than there may be some overlaps, but there also may be a lot of differences about what influences organizational culture in South Africa. And this just shows that our approach to organizational culture change in our country in South Africa for this discussion, the assessment tools, the interventions, the discussions that we have may have to be a little bit different than in other countries. We've got some unique challenges here that impacts on culture. We've had some discussions with many managers specifically who stated that the role of organized labor, for example, plays a very big role, either positive or negative in terms of culture. We've been talking about the different cultures and the interaction of different cultures when working together on a shop floor, and maybe perceptions either way. We've been engaging in differences with regard to race and gender perceptions in terms of line heads and how they handle their line lower line line function. So I think the point that we want to make in South Africa, we need a unique approach that is tweaked specifically for this institution and these institutions at our country to attend to food safety cultures. Thank you, everyone. This is the last slide, and just a few take-home messages. I think definitely what we want to achieve with this webinar is to start creating awareness that the soft sciences, the human side of our food safety industry, the workers on different levels, from management to mid-level management to shop floor, how we interact with them, how we motivate them, how we bring them in to take responsibility, to take ownership of their work, plays a big role in, at the end of the day, the quality and the safety of our food products. And there should be a mind shift a little bit in terms of, or even not just a little, but I think significantly in terms of how we approach this. People should not just be left behind. There should be people, not only process when we go on into plants and we never to do audits. What aspect does the human resource department play in that audit? I don't even realize whether we even go to the human HR department and ask issues about incentives and that aspect, working hours and other aspects that may impact on culture. And then maybe just lastly is rather that we start talking about opening the debate, and definitely this webinar sets out to do that. And thank you so much for everyone's contribution, is to say it's good if we've got food safety programs, we need those, but if we look beyond those, we need to also have food safety cultures. And let's open the debate and let's do this for our country to improve food safety. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ray. Thank you very much for that. I think now we've all got a better understanding in terms of what exactly food safety culture is, and the fact that it's an area that we have to work on, just like we work on our food safety management system, and the fact that it can have a significant impact on the success of our food safety management system. I'm now going to chat to Najib Salim. She has had a very challenging task in the last few months. Personally negotiating the listeriosis outbreak. You might remember that RCL were initially implicated in the ST6 outbreak and even named by the minister. However, there was subsequently a further press release to clear RCL of any STL contamination, but unfortunately not before a lot of press and brand impact. Najib, thank you for joining us and taking the time to help us to learn from your experiences, what you as RCL actually went through as an organization in this crisis, and how food safety culture is playing a role. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Linda. Good day to everybody, panelists and attendees joining in. I would like to basically share with you, with regards to the listeriosis crisis, everything that we as RCL have gone through, but most importantly, how our culture had impacted our reaction to the entire crisis. Right, so just some background in terms of where we come from. Basically, on the 4th of March, the minister announced the recall of Wrapup. Two of his reasons being that the presence of Listeria monocytogenes was noted in our Volhoek facility, as well as on samples tested from the trade. Now, I think it's really important for us to state some facts related to our facility and to the incidences that led up to this announcement. First of all, in terms of sampling that was carried out in the Volhoek plant, this was done during food production, where we use raw materials such as chicken, which are likely to contain Listeria and Listeria monocytogenes. So the perception that Listeria was picked up and should not have been found in the environment is not true, because as you would know, in terms of microbiology, organisms such as Listeria monocytogenes are widely found in the environment, in raw materials. Further to this, we had information that 28 of our samples were positive, but in terms of testing for the ST6 strain, we found that only 20 were actually positive, raising questions around the credibility of tests that were conducted on these samples taken by DOH. We further announced, as well as the Minister, that no ST6 was detected in any of the RCL samples. The trade samples that were said to be positive were all from a single store. Now, you would remember from the announcement, the Minister did make a bold statement about staying away from processed meat as a whole because of cross-contamination. It didn't do much for the industry because it meant that the entire processed meat industry was impacted. And one of his reasons for making such a statement was based on the fact that there may have been cross-contamination with contaminated batches. What we then did as RCL Foods is that we went back to our retention samples, tested for the very same batches that were from trade, and found them to be all negative. What also worried us most was the fact that in terms of these results that were presented, we could not have access to any enumeration results, as this was not done. Now, you would note that when it comes to any microbial contamination, enumeration results are very key in terms of helping you during the investigation process. More importantly, enumeration in this context was key because of the fact that the only guidelines that existed in South Africa was SANS 885 that actually had a limit of up to 100. The enumeration results would have also assisted us in terms of products in identifying what were the lethal levels that may have affected these patients that succumbed to listeriosis. DOH, during their visit to our facility, also took some polony samples, which were also tested as being negative. Note that these samples were taken from the production line itself and had tested negative. Now, prior to the 4th of March, it must be noted that we actually had a visit by NICD as well as DOH in terms of this investigation. And one of the comments that were made at that particular point on the 5th of February was that we had submitted or had shared sufficient information that showed that we had sufficient control measures to prevent the likelihood of cross-contamination of our products. The reasoning for this was that when the listeriosis crisis took place and began in 2017, we reacted, which is what any manufacturer should actually do. As much as we had food safety management systems across our sites and we are certified, our immediate reaction was to assess whether these were sufficient and whether controls we had in place were sufficient. Nonetheless, despite the risk assessments that were carried out, our response was to immediately increase our protocols where possible. This included cleaning protocols. It included going as far as taking positive samples and sending them for whole genome sequencing to assess whether we were likely to have ST6 in our facility. We also took the stance of ensuring that we was transparent with our customers. And so we began with internally communicating the outbreak to our employees, as well as communicating our activities and results to our customers. We also requested engagement with regulators in terms of the different departments, DAF, DOH, as we wanted to be part and parcel of the investigation process and assist where possible. But as some of you may know, apart from the meeting with DAF, at that particular point, there was actually no other engagements with industry that would have allowed us to really tap into where this issue was coming from. Next slide, please. So most people want to know, what have we learned from this process? At RCL, we have a set of rules or rather ways of doing things that we refer to as our way. And one of the things that we noted throughout this crisis is that we were very much sure that the way in which we work as an organization, our processes and our people, their reaction to the entire process is something that we can actually be proud of. This highlighted to us that the mitigating control measures, as well as our values and our culture, is something that we had well established and we could actually share with others. One thing that does come to mind when I think of this crisis is the fact that transparency through this entire process was key. And that's something that I would share as a lesson with other organizations, in that in situations such as these, transparency helps you to share with others in terms of your due diligence defense. It also helps to which is something all stakeholders, including regulators, is to invest in preparation. The value of preparation is quite key here. By attempting to make a difference from 2017 with regards to this crisis, there was a lot we had already had in place that ultimately proved our innocence at the end of the day. When we talk about investing in a pledge, at RCL Foods, our people pledge to quality and food safety. And investing in the pledge of quality and food safety means investing in technology, investing in training, investing in all aspects that can help to mitigate risk within the facility. We also found that partnerships play an integral role in crises such as these. So partnerships with organizations, partnerships with industry professionals, as well as partnerships with regulators. Now, regulators might not always be forthcoming, but having an open line to regulators allows for the process to work smoothly, allows for easy process in terms of investigation. But most important of all, invest in an organization culture. For us, our own internal organizational culture is something that really complements what we call the food safety culture. Hence, for us as well, food safety culture was not a new concept. Our culture in terms of the way in which our people behave, from the floor worker right up to our board of directors, is what actually assisted us in terms of getting through this crisis and continue to get through it in terms of all the other changes we are implementing in our facility. The impact of our food safety management system in dealing with this crisis effectively, at RCL, because we basically adopt an integrated approach to implementation of systems, which includes FSSC 22000 amongst others. This actually helps us ensure that all elements of our business are addressed in any given situation, including crises such as the listeriosis outbreak. Some of these elements that we went to in terms of ensuring that all our systems were in place, and in terms of our activities, they reflected what was documented in our systems, include our response to emergency preparedness, our recall management processes, our strategy, which relates to communication. This could be seen in terms of our immediate response as of the 4th of March, as well as our response pre the 4th of March, in December 2017 to our internal stakeholders as well as our external stakeholders. Our business continuity plans, our procedures relating to traceability, which was very key in terms of conducting this recall effectively and successfully. Processes related to record management, which is key in terms of trying to investigate if things went wrong, where did they go wrong, and in terms of being able to provide the evidence required by regulators. And of course, review that entailed everybody from our board of directors being involved in identifying if we had gaps in our system and if we did have areas that we could improve further to mitigate risk going forward. So the ability to execute these and other pertinent processes contributed to the manner in which RCL responded to the listeriosis outbreak and the recall. And what should actually change given this outbreak? For RCL, we've enhanced our processes to a level where some may consider unnecessary. However, given our experience during this crisis, it is additional effort we're willing to take to increase customer and consumer confidence in our brands. What we have noted is that part and parcel of moving forward is making sure that we change the way we do things as an industry, as regulatory bodies, as stakeholders. One of the things that we've recognized is that we need to break down the silos. The response to incidences such as the listeriosis outbreak should include assessments of potential risks and should not be limited to actions to address the current situation only. And so to our regulators, we would expect that they would engage more with industry. We would expect that they would engage with consumers in terms of education when it comes to such crises, in-depth education. We'd expect that there's education extended to their representatives, such as the EHPs, who are coming around to facilities and to retail stores, sampling and reporting on these results on a public platform. Monitoring of industry activities, which is something that may have led to the situation in the first place, the fact that we did not have data available. And of course, address the fragmentation across different directorates. For us in South Africa, I think that's a key element in that one of the ways of maintaining a strong food safety framework is making sure that all stakeholders, all directorates have a common understanding in terms of what is required. So in this regard, I'm referring to the likes of a DOH and DAF working together to make sure that at the end of the day, it is the best interest of the consumer that's at hand. In terms of industry, it is important that we prioritize our systems, but not only from a documented perspective, but from an action perspective, how we actually implement our systems. How do we make sure that our employees are aware and are effectively executing elements of our systems? For me, this means being a part of the company strategy. The company strategy should not just be focused on making the profit. It should be focused on holistically putting our products out there that are of quality, of the highest safety levels that can be achieved, as well as making sure that at the end of the day you satisfy the legal requirements associated with these products. Increased collaboration between industry bodies and experts is also quite key, and in actual fact is one of the ways we're going to move forward in preventing such a crisis in the future. So living the food safety is an ongoing job, and yes, there are challenges. Professor Ray did talk about the fact that food safety should go beyond systems, and that part and parcel of making all of this is getting buy-in from your employees. We need to get closer to the issues that influence the behavior of individuals. For us at RCL Foods, behaviors reflect an organization's culture, as well as an organization's culture influences strategy execution. So as a manufacturer, you have the ability to determine and manage behaviors you desire within your organization. Our corporate culture at RCL Foods has an influence on the behaviors we desire, including living food safety. It is an element that is woven into our ways of working, and most importantly of all, we are continuously measuring it. Yes, there would be those people who deviate against what is expected from a food safety perspective, but what's important is our response to those deviations. So in terms of food safety culture, it may be a concept that is widely spoken about in recent months. However, any manufacturing organization should have a food safety forming a part of their culture from the time they decide to open that door and start manufacturing a product for a consumer. At RCL, we use various tools to drive the importance of food safety. Our way, which is a description of our culture, embodies behaviors necessary to create this. We engage with employees on food safety issues and its impact, from sending SMSs regarding the listeriosis outbreak to having conversations with individuals that go beyond just the documented system. It goes as far as what affects them as human beings. We basically tap into emotions as well, because it's these emotions that impact on the way in which these employees behave in the organization. We share results, actions, and potential risk with all, from our board to our employees. For us, sharing of information helps to highlight where we require more assistance. Sharing information helps to highlight what should be the key aspects addressing our strategies going forward. We also reward good behaviors, and that's often an issue that is left out in organizations, in that we preach food safety, we expect our employees to carry out these good practices, but never reward or articulate when they are doing well. Most importantly, we take disciplinary action when things do go wrong. In some instances, when you have a good food safety culture within an organization, some of that disciplinary action is taken by fellow employees themselves. So for RCL, a food safety policy is not just a documented policy reflecting our management commitment, but it's a pledge by each and every one of our employees in terms of ensuring that product that leaves our facility is safe, conforms to our quality requirements, and at the end of the day, it's something that they can be proud of.
Thank you so much, Najib. The comments that you've made and some of the pointers that you've actually shared with us, I think, are very valuable in terms of opportunities for improvement within everyone's food safety culture. I love what you said about rewarding. I'd love to see the pledge, because I think that personal commitment links to behavioral science aspects that show that that's a real key to success in terms of engagement. We lost you a bit when you were chatting about transparency, but given the fact that you were in the middle of the crisis and implicated in the crisis, I think it was really brave of the organization to be that transparent with the employees, but how essential that actually is to ensure that your employees don't and distrust you. You know, if they're getting it directly from you, at least you know, or at least they know that they're getting the right information. They're not just learning about their company in the press. So thank you so much for sharing so openly about your experiences. The question I have to ask, though, is food safety culture a nice to have? And I think if we, go back to our friend and mentor, Frank Yanas, he actually states, in his opinion, food safety culture is a prerequisite program. So it's not something that we strive for and aim for kind of as a goal once we have a food safety management system in place and certificates on the wall. But in fact, we should have it before we even venture into a formal food safety management system. And so I'm going to ask Rolf now, because in your experience as an inspector, when you worked previously at AIB and the role you now play at Intercom, you've done thousands and thousands of audits. And what have you noted, what have you observed in this work in terms of visual observations or visual manifestations, if you like, of culture in relation to food safety in the audits that you've done?
Yeah, thanks, Linda. Thanks, Food Focus, for the opportunity. Good day, all the attendees. Yes, so I've been an auditor for a while, and after a while, one starts to look beyond the checklist and beyond the standards, and you try to figure out what's really wrong in an organization. And it always points to the culture. And as you said earlier, are we not auditing the wrong things? We're auditing the symptoms, the cleaning and the pest control and the traceability. That's all symptoms that go wrong. It's the culture that's the root cause that we're not getting to. So what I'll do now, I'm going to share just some indicators that I always look for to see if culture is amiss, and if you're in food manufacturing, maybe you should look at yourself and see if any of these indicators are at your facility, and then you know you've got a problem. So the first thing is it starts right at the opening meeting. Now, if you start the opening meeting and there's just one junior QC because everybody else is too busy, then you know it's going to be a long day. And they're not committed to food safety, and it's not going to work. Next thing, and then when you start doing the physical inspection, a very good indicator, ablutions. Now, one can't be serious about food safety if the ablutions are a mess, because they won't be receptive to food safety and hygiene. So one looks at this, and even things like derogatory messages about management on the graffiti, then there's really no culture. Workshops, that's what it should look like. Maintenance is always the team that's last to embrace food safety culture and food safety. So if the workshops look like this, then you know you're winning, and you know you've got a good culture. Leaks, preventive maintenance. So if you're a wet plant, if there's leaks all over the place, there's no preventive maintenance. If you're a dry plant and there's spillages all over the place, there's no preventive maintenance. There's no preventive maintenance. That means food safety and operations there's no leadership. It's not coming from top management. There's not enough guidance to the maintenance team on things like food safety. Right, my favorite, window dressing. So this facility had an audit, and you can still see the tags from the price tags from plastic land on those containers which they bought yesterday, and they printed out the labels and with the right allergen messages and everything. But it's not sustainable. It just was for the audit. Once one starts seeing things like this, there's no true food safety culture. Look at the notice boards. Now, here's a notice board that looks pretty healthy because you could see food safety. It's not just production figures and occupational safety. Food safety really features, and there's incentive schemes, and it's more importantly, it's up to date. A lot of time, these notice boards are 6 months old, and it's just there for window dressing. So a good indication of culture is always to look at notice boards. The list of the length of the corrective action list. An organization with a poor food safety culture will have an endless list of corrective actions and will never get in front. And that is because top management is not giving the support they should to the food safety team in closing, getting to the root causes of corrective actions. And then also reactions and behavior. Now, over the years, I've had some very good and very bad reactions to audit findings, to audit scores. And the things one looks out for, and what you don't want, and what is indicative of a poor food safety culture, is if the top manager doesn't attend at all, and they just sit in a closing meeting, and then they argue all the findings and the score, and they become aggressive. And the other good indicator is if the quality manager or a production person in the facility starts whispering to you where to look and where to find the critical findings, because they're not getting the support in solving it, and they want to use the auditor to get attention to that. So, you can pick up a lot on culture on reactions. So next question is, can one audit culture? Can one audit it with a checklist? Is it possible? So the answer there is yes and no. There are some things you can check and some you can't. Now, firstly, I'm not a fan of a checklist at all, because it limits you. It doesn't let you investigate properly, assess the situation, read the game in front of you. It limits you too much. So one should use your intuition when auditing and doing inspections. So what things one can check in a checklist is your food safety policy. Are there measurable objectives? Are they being reviewed? Are they improving? Through meeting minutes and so on, one can assess these things. One can look at an organogram. One can see if there's a healthy reporting structure, whether quality is reporting to production or to the senior management who's impartial. All those things one can check. One can look at the food safety budget. Is food safety being paid for? I mean, are we planning for food safety? Is there enough funds for training? That one can assess by following a checklist, as well as succession planning. But now the next slide will show the things we can't check, that you need the intuition and reading between the lines. And the first one is the food safety commitment. Are we doing food safety because we have to or we want to? That you can't checklist. That comes from interviews with the top management, interviews from the shop floor, and that kind of thing. Integrity, falsifying records, cheating records, leading you along the wrong path, all that is signs of poor food safety culture and poor food safety integrity, trying to hide things. Effective communication, you can look in a checklist, through a checklist, whether there's a communication procedure, but that doesn't help. One needs to speak to people, look for things like temporary repairs, modifications that have been done without departments knowing about it. All that one can't use a checklist. Same as with teamwork. One needs to assess that by gauging the situation. A lot of time I spend in audits is speaking to the shop floor and establishing whether they just trained, are they robotized to follow a procedure, or are they actually educated? Do they understand the reason why they're doing things? And then bottom line is really to establish if food safety is really truly in a company's DNA. Now, checklists don't ask this question, but it's so important, and that's really the bottom line that one has to establish. So there's a lot of unspoken rules that you pick up through the personnel behavior during an audit, the leadership, the symptoms. So it's really like peeling an onion. You need to get through all the layers, work through all the symptoms, speak to all the people before you get to the real unspoken rules and the real root cause of where things are going wrong. Perhaps just a story of what poor food safety culture could cost the company. Now, this is a picture of a sugar mill who's got FSSC certification. They've got all the procedures they have to, and they've trained everybody, and on paper they look great. But what happened is one night a sight glass broke on a pan. So that's the thing that that changes the sugar from, it crystallizes the sugar. So that broke one night. Line was stopped, maintenance fixed the sight glass, they analyzed the situation, they decided what to do, and their main objective was to fix this as quickly as possible. And they did it in record time. They started the line. Next morning, QA comes in and they hear about the broken sight glass. They assemble the pieces that they were found, which was given by maintenance, and they find out there's pieces missing. They do their traceabilities and they find it's in a 400-ton silo. Now that picture's on top of the 400-ton silo. It's huge. It's millions and millions of rands. What do you do now? So that was caused simply by maintenance people not thinking food safety initially and thinking production. Right, so just showing that there's really a cost to poor food safety culture. Right, so it's really just a mindset change is needed to try and audit the root causes and not just the symptoms, like I said earlier, all levels in the organization. Maybe to end off, just something from Action Coach. Now, Action Coach is an international consulting company who fixes companies. They make them profitable again. And their main objective is not to fix productivity or teach you how to market. They fix the culture. And when they fix the culture, all the other things fall in place. So this is just some of their strategies. Now, what they look at and what they fix: commitment, the ownership, integrity, excellence, not measuring our mediocrity, being committed, having a willingness to win. And so the list goes on. But the one I want to focus on is on the slide, and that is having fun. And that's so important. That's probably the indicator of food safety culture is when you're having fun. Now, I've seen it so many times when, there's a bit of joking in the opening meeting and everybody's friendly and you walk around, everybody's smiley faces. Those companies are the ones with a culture and who do well and where food safety is truly working. So yeah, I believe in everything in life, build in a little bit of fun.
Thank you, Rolf. That's really great. Thanks so much for giving us an overview from your experience. I'm going to kind of think about. Please feel free to drop your questions on the chat line if there are any questions. We kind of just want to look at it from the point of view of the regulations for the last few weeks. We've had a lot of information that's been coming from the Departments of Health. We've got CASP regulations, we're expecting new micro regulations. And the question we have to ask ourselves is, although we obviously need the new regulations, are the regulations going to be sufficient to actually change some of the problems that we've seen in the food industry, some of the issues that we've been touching on today? It's quite interesting that Mervyn King says that you cannot legislate good behavior. I think everybody today has touched on integrity, ethics, transparency. Although we have new regulations, are these regulations going to ensure that we have these fundamental values in the food industry in order to prevent a tragedy going forward? I think that actually we need to be, considering the new hygiene regulations and what the person in charge responsibilities actually are. Can we continue to justify non-compliances just because we don't have the budget? Can we continue to have conversations at board level where we're just paying lip service, not actually taking food safety seriously? Do we really have a healthy attitude to food safety at all levels in our organization? Or are we just trying to do what we have to do, just pass, just do the minimum, just chase the audit scores, but not fundamentally engage in a food safety program, because we truly, truly believe that consumers' health is actually important. Rake, you've said it, more rules, more policies don't actually motivate staff. Rolf, you've said in terms of the work that you've done, you've seen many observations that although a company may have ticked all the right boxes, fundamentally the food safety management system actually doesn't have the sound foundation. I think if we look at some of the aspects that we've spoken about today, it looks like as food safety professionals, as scientists, we actually need a new set of tools. We need to start looking at human beings. We need a little bit of psychology. We need to start talking to people. We need to start thinking about how we can make food safety fun. And I think for some of us, as been involved in this for a long time, we're very focused on the task. We're very focused on making sure that all the checklists and procedures are followed. People are not actually following up. They're not actually buying into what we're developing. And we're going to need to change the way that we engage with people. So where do we go from here? Well, that's where Food Focus would like to help. And so we'd like to obviously lead the conversation. Thank you so much for joining us today. We want to lead the charge as far as food safety culture initiatives are concerned in South Africa and in the region. We've partnered with Professor Rake Lewis in developing a brand new website that we launched this week called foodsafetyculture.co.za. What's this website going to bring you? It's going to bring you, hopefully, a platform that will inspire you, a platform that will inform you, and a platform that will equip you with tools to help you understand what you can do to improve your food safety culture as an organization. We're planning a new set of tools, bringing in partners, bringing in experts from overseas to assist us in trying to establish, how we can improve what we've been doing, how we can improve engagement at all levels within our organization. So you can look forward to more articles, more conversations like this, more webinars where we specifically talk about how we improve the people aspect of our business, the people aspect of our food safety management systems, how we improve engagement, how we improve behaviors, how we go from training people on how to wash their hands to actually seeing them doing it and doing it right every day without us having to actually fill in a checklist or have to supervise them, without threatening them with hand swabs. So please stay connected. We look forward to having you on our polls. Look out for our food safety polls on Twitter, food safety culture polls on Twitter, to kind of gauge your understanding of the subject and how we can assist. Share your ideas. We would love to hear some more practical ideas of things that you've actually engaged with, and watch the space, because I think as we all work together, we can take food safety to another level in South Africa. We can't stay where we are. We've got to do things differently going forward, and we might need to do it in a slightly different way. So thank you so much for your participation today. Thank you for your comments. We're going to pick all of those up, and any questions that there might be in a follow-up article on foodsafetyculture.co.za. You'll be able to link from Food Focus directly to that website, and so we look forward to sharing more information with you and getting some feedback from you as well. To our panel, Najib, Rolf, Rake, thank you so much. We look forward to working with all of you in the future. And we trust to everybody out there who's been with us for the last hour on this webinar that you've learned something and that you've got something to think about. And so we have our next webinar on food safety culture. Take care and have a good day.